Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. Today we're visiting the larch forest again, and on the last video we left off, we removed some of the lower needles on the upper parts of the trees to reduce the vigor in the upper parts, and it was getting close to the point of starting to prune the new growth. So the trees now are at the point where they need pruning, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's go in and have a look at the new growth, the new shoots coming out. You can see some of the top growth here is quite long and the needles are coming out. Other growth is, let's find one here, maybe here. It's not as long and the needles are still coming out at the tips. So there's a few different stages of growth here. Some of these back shoots here are really long and vigorous. You can see the large needles, really vigorous growth on them. There's some at this back tree here. The new growth is really long. So that needs pruning. So our effort today is to balance the vigor again in the tree, is to reduce the growth on the top more, and you can see the growth on the bottom isn't as vigorous. It's still there, but it's not as vigorous. So we're going to do less to the bottom and more up top. And I'm going to talk about pruning forest trees versus pruning a regular single tree. There's differences. So when you're pruning trees in a forest, there's only a certain size you can grow the tree to before branches from one tree start overlapping the next tree beside it. So you have to keep it pruned to a certain size. Whereas if you have a single tree in a pot, you can let it slowly grow over the years and get wider and fuller. But you can't do that in a forest. You have to keep the growth very compact. So when you're pruning to keep the growth compact, you've got to look for buds you can prune back to, growth closer to the trunk of the tree that you can prune back to, and you have to do it. Otherwise, the tree's just going to slowly get larger every year, and they're all going to interfere, and it'll just spoil the overall design. You won't see individual trees, you'll just see a massive foliage up top. So it's a little different than pruning a single tree in a pot. So we're going to start pruning the growth on the trees, these new shoots coming out, and there's two techniques you can use to do this. One is you can grab the base of the shoot and pinch it out by hand. The other is you can get a pair of scissors and you can go in and prune the shoot off between the needles. So the technique I use depends on the growth. If we have some really long loose growth, I would go in with the scissors and prune it. If it's a tight little bundle down below, I would pinch it with my fingers. So that's the two methods you can use. Both are equally as good. When you have a tight little shoot and you prune it with scissors, you're probably going to be cutting through needles unless you're very careful. So you might get more browning at the tips, which at this point doesn't matter too much. If you're pruning it to get ready for a show, you definitely wouldn't want brown tips on your needles. So you would be more careful not to cut through needles, to carefully pinch it so you're not breaking any needles off and that kind of thing. So I bought some new tools. They're stainless steel surgical scissors. I've got a straight pair of scissors. I've got a large curved pair of scissors. And I have a really fine pair of curved scissors. So those are the tools I'm going to be using today. These tools, I bought them at a surplus store that carries some surgical equipment. and they were $2.49 a piece. So really inexpensive, and they do a great job. If you accidentally leave them out on your bench at night, they won't be rusty in the morning, which is good for me because I tend to do that a lot. As I'm pruning trees late at night, it starts getting dark, I pack up and I forget about my tools sometimes. And if you have really nice bonsai tools, they'll probably be rusty in the morning. So stainless steel tools, they're good for me. They're cheap and they work quite well. Okay, so let's go in and start pruning. Okay, we're going to start at the top of this tree, and we're looking for a couple of things. One is the direction of the growth. So anything going straight up, you want to prune back harder. Anything that's going horizontal or weeping, we want to let grow more. On this forest, I want all the branches to not be upright. I want them to, go downhill or be weeping. So the first thing we're going to do is we have a strong shoot here. It's not on the apex. So we want that branch to grow more horizontally instead of straight up. So we're going to prune it fairly close. And I'm going in between the needles here the best I can and pruning it off quite close to the trunk, or quite close to the branch. And again, we have another one here that's going quite vertical, so we're going to prune it off quite short. And you always want to leave some of the needles from the new growth. I would say at least probably 4 or 5 needles at least of the new growth. If you prune it right back, you'll just lose that branch or bud. Here's a small one that is growing in a nice direction, and the needles are really tight on it. So we can't get in with scissors, so we're going to have to finger pinch that one. So we'll just go in, grab it by the base, approximately to where we want to pull it, and we just give it a tug, like so. So it breaks the tip off, the growth tip, and we've got some needles left over. Here's another one that's quite weak, and we just want to pinch the tip off, like that. Now we're getting up to the very top of the apex here. So again, we want to prune back quite hard. So we're going right in close to the base of the new shoot and pruning it off. And again up top here, trying to go between the needles. Right there. I'm pruning that off. And again over here, this is more of a side branch, so we'll leave it a little longer, like that, and another one. So that's got our very top of the apex pruned. And I've got some back branches here I'm just going to prune back to. Take the tips off. Every time you remove the tip of a new shoot, you're going to get more ramification. So when you prune that tip off, you're going to get more branches come out from that point where you pruned. So you'll increase your density, which can be a good thing down lower. Up top you have to be careful you don't get your growth too dense. Otherwise it'll shade out your bottom branches and you'll get too much vigor in the top of the tree. Now on a larch, this first spring growth, as you can see, is quite vigorous. And when we prune it back, the second flush of growth will be less vigorous. And when that gets pruned back, your third flush of growth will be even less vigorous. So towards the end of the season, towards fall, I typically get about 4 flushes of growth in these trees. So as you get closer to fall, the needles get smaller, the growth gets finer, and all these old long needles can be removed. And you'll end up with really short needles, good ramification, you get a lot of branching. And that's kind of your goal, is to get to fall with lots of fine branching, small needles, and weaker growth. And then once all the needles fall off, that's when you go in and do your structural pruning then, to clean out all that new ramification, reducing the vigor in the top, leaving the bottom more as it is, keeping the vigor in the bottom and reducing it at the top. So yeah, so all these needles that you see now from the new growth, which are quite long, as it gets towards fall, we'll remove those if they're still there. They may fall off naturally as the new growth comes in. But yeah, that's your goal, is to get ramification in the summer, try and get as many flushes of growth as you can to really improve the density of your branches, and it gives you a lot of choice when it comes to pruning the structure for the next year. So I've showed you some examples of pruning the very top of the tree, going back quite close, leaving at least 4 or 5 needles. So on the middle parts of the tree, or the medium vigor zones, such as this, well, we'll take this as an example, we want to leave it just a little longer. So we'll go in, and when the tree's all full like this, it's pretty hard to look at the structure of it. So it's best to almost not worry about the structure of the branches. Save that till fall, when it's lost its needles and you can go in and clean it all up. So for now, we're just pinching for vigor. Pinching and cutting. And you want to prune every tip. If it's just a weak little shoot, you still want to prune the tip off to get ramification. So because this is so tight, we have to pinch it like so. And if you want to develop foliage pads, as I said, any growth that's shooting straight up, prune back shorter, and your growth that's coming horizontal or weeping, you're going to leave longer. So you encourage those horizontal and weeping branches, and the growth on the top of the branch, which is shooting straight up, you just reduce it in height, and you'll maintain some definition in your foliage pads, rather than looking like one big mass of green. So now we'll go down low to some of these lower branches, and I'll show you what I do for that. Okay, so we're down low here, and again, because this growth is quite fine, I'm just going to pinch it out. So all these vertical shoots, we're going to pinch back hard. There's one in here that's growing quite strong straight upwards, so we'll just pinch it back quite hard. And these horizontal ones, we'll just pinch the tips off, like so. Vertical one will prune back harder. Horizontal one, a little less. Just the tip off. Tip off here. And you can see we've got our foliage pad back. You can see that. That's how we want it for now. So that's what we do down lower. So I'm gonna continue pruning the trees up. It'll probably take a while. There's quite a few trees to do. And we'll come back when it's all done. Okay, so I'm finished what I would call round one of pruning. Getting rid of all the obvious strong growth, reducing it back. If you do miss a shoot, don't worry about it too much. You'll find it'll keep growing with more vigor, and it'll become quite obvious that you didn't prune that shoot later on. So don't worry about, you know, if you miss a branch or whatever. You'll notice it later on that it'll just continue growing strongly. The ones you've pruned back will be generating new buds in the meantime. They won't be growing as strongly, so the shoots you miss will become quite obvious. When you are pruning, look at the trees from above, try and make sure that each branch is getting sunlight. It might determine how far you're going to prune your branches back to. Some of these lower ones we haven't pruned very much because we're trying to get them a little longer so they can get some sunlight and strength. Another thing in a forest, just like in a real forest, you're going to get some natural dieback on the dark parts of the forest where all these branches overlap, and that's quite natural. You know, there's just no way light can penetrate into the interior of the forest, and it looks quite natural to have, you know, your dead branches on the inside of the forest, and the outside of the forest has your vigorous branches. So, you know, you don't want all your interior branches dying, so that's why we're thinning the trees to get some sunlight in there, but you are going to get branches die off in the inside of the forest, and it's quite natural, and it looks good. It's what would happen in nature. So yeah, so that's round one of pruning our larch forest. The next step will be, where we prune them, as they grow new buds and shoots, we'll be pruning it again. And like I said, you can get up to four bursts of growth in the one summer. So yeah, if you have a larch, you'll be pruning it quite often if the tree's healthy. So the last thing I'm doing today is just cleaning up all the needles from the landscape, just to tidy it up and make it look nice. If you do have your larch in a pot and it's in training, you can leave all the needles at the base of the tree in the soil. They make great compost for the tree. Just let them go brown on the base of the pot or the top of the soil, and you can water it normally, and yeah, it'll provide some nutrients to the tree. But in this case, we want to clean it up just to make it look nice. I finished picking all the needles off the forest floor, cleaning it up. It's kind of like washing your car. When you hand wash your car, you notice every dent and scratch in your car. And same thing when you're, you know, cleaning up your forest floor. It makes you look at the moss, and you kind of see all the things you want to change and fix. And so it's good time spent with your tree, your trees. We're not going to do any landscaping today. We're going to save that for another video. I've had some suggestions of putting a pathway in here, which is a nice idea. I want to put a little water feature, just sort of like a bog area. That may come next time we repot this forest. I'll put a little black pool in there, moss overhanging the edges, sort of like a wetland area. So far, our little cutting is still surviving down here. And the 2 trees I put in the back are still alive, and they're alive. They're not growing vigorously yet, but I'm hoping by the end of summer they will. They're not dying, which is a good thing. And yeah, everything else is going well in the forest, and that's it for today. So Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.